Welcome to the fourth and final part in this mini-series about the history of Blackpool Pleasure Beach. As you know from the first three, we're going to cover all the attractions, the news, the celebrities, blah blah blah. This one is all about Amanda. Now, her predecessors were pretty busy. Obviously, Amanda is still currently the managing director, so, you know, we don't know how much longer that will continue. I can only cover the 20 years that she has been in charge. But yeah, let's get into it. Now, to be honest, the start of Amanda's reign is actually quite a sad tale. She came into being the managing director because of the passing of her father. Now, from what I've read online, he passed away at the Pleasure Beach at a private function, which I think might actually have been Amanda's wedding. I could be wrong on that one, but nonetheless, he passed away in a place he loves, and obviously the park was then handed down to Amanda. Now, sadly, even further, his mother Doris passed away 11 days later, actually only a few hours after Geoffrey's funeral. Now, she didn't attend his funeral because she wasn't feeling that great, but yeah, within the space of less than 2 weeks, two fairly important people in the family and the business passed away, and leaving obviously Amanda to take the reins. Now, in terms of what happened this year, again, there was a little bit of a tragedy because there was another fire. Again, Grand National, but it kind of spread a little bit, impacted Alice, and ultimately knocked out Trauma Towers because that is no longer there. We did get one addition in 2004, and that was Bling. This was a Zira TriStar, I think it's called. You'll have seen it. In fact, I've probably got footage on as I'm speaking. Interesting ride. I didn't go on this one. I kind of wish I had, because its successor, the Red Arrows, is crap. So, kind of wish I'd got on Bling. Now, after the fire from 2004, we got brand new trains on the Grand National in 2005. Now, it's the trains we have today. It's a rough ride, and every time I go on that ride, those bars just wind me. They're not comfortable. Many people say previous trains were significantly better, and that, you know, if they could replace the trains, that would improve the ride a lot. I don't remember the old trains, so please let me know down below what you think. But this was the year that we got the current set of trains on the ride, obviously because of that fire. And there was a strange little addition in 2005, and it was a simulator called the Beast. Now, I've struggled to find any pictures or videos of this, but effectively this was a simulator ride of the Beast at Kings Island, a wooden coaster over in America. Now, there was also rumours floating around in 2005 of the bigger one. Now, this was supposed to be a kind of launched coaster, a bit like Stealth or Red Force, but it was supposed to shoot you out across the promenade, so it would leave the park, go out over a custom built promenade, massive top hat, and then back into the station again. Now, many people say that there are markings on the ground that are footers for this. There's mixed reports about that, whether that is genuinely true or not. I mean, it was supposed to go out over the sea, so this wouldn't have been where the top hat is, so potentially it could have been, but unfortunately that did not happen. Now, obviously, as we'll get to later on in this episode, there's some rumblings about a coaster coming in a few years' time. Now, whether it is the resurrection of this project or something completely new, we do not know. Also found some pictures of celebrities. I have Peter Kay on Big Dipper, and I also have Gary Barlow on Alice. Now, 2006 saw a little bit of a rebranding exercise because Mr. Funshine was dropped and we got the previous logo, the kind of exclamation mark Pleasure Beach logo. Now, as many of you are now aware, Mr. Funshine is slowly being reintroduced. He's back on the entrance and stuff, and there was yet another rebranding exercise that we will cover later on in this episode. So this was when he kind of left, I suppose, and the park decided to go down a different route. I mentioned this one in previous episodes because I thought it was absolutely bonkers, but Roller Coaster got new trains this year from the Big Dipper, and this was actually the first year, 2006, first year that it had restraints. I mean, again, I know it isn't the most intense ride. If you've seen the previous episodes, you know there was a tragedy on it where somebody was ejected from the ride, so there was precedent to put restraints on this ride. But yeah, it took up until 2006 and a new set of trains for it to actually get some. Now, the former Black Hole and former planetarium building was used for a 4D cinema this year. Now, it had all the sort of things you would expect. It had smells, sprays, leg ticklers, vibrating seats, all that kind of good stuff. Didn't go on it myself, don't know what movies it showed, so I'd love to hear down below any details or any memories, good or bad. I also found a couple of other videos about the Pleasure Beach this year. So the first one was Denise Van Outing. She was filming an episode of Where the Heart Is. Pretty sure she's on the Big Dipper in this. And then there was a large documentary about the Pet Shop Boys, and in there, one of them mentions that he used to work at the Pleasure Beach.
The Pleasure Beach is always changing. That's one of the great things about it. There's always a new ride being built and old ones disappearing. And you know, I worked here, a summer job once, operating the big wheel just down there. And if you're born in Blackpool, this is a place that you'll just sort of hang out and sort of take for granted, really.
Now, after the unfortunate removal of the log flume in 2006, we saw another attraction added. Now, it was a new coaster, which on the face of it sounds like a good thing. This particular coaster, though, not so much. The closure of Southport Pleasureland, the former Traumatizer coaster, Vekoma SLC, was moved to Blackpool. It was painted blue and it was called Infusion. Now, I did the Walk the Woody experience with Andy Highgate last year, and he said that it got its name because they literally infused it into that space. There is, I think, a meter on either side, 1 meter between Infusion and Dipper, and 1 meter between Infusion and the big one. So it was definitely a bit of an engineering challenge. It is the world's first and I think only coaster fully suspended over water. A little bit of a stretch because sometimes when you go to the park, the water is drained. But in theory, it should be the only one. Now, it's an absolute headbanger. It is a ride that I go on maybe once a year. Every time I go on it, I wonder why I went on it. It gets rougher and rougher every year. That's kind of a telltale sign of Vekoma SLCs, unfortunately. However, there are new trains available that apparently are a lot smoother, so if it's not going anywhere, it would be great to see it get some much loved TLC. Oh, and it got an advert.
Infusion, the new legs dangling 5 looping roller coaster over water at Pleasure Beach, Blackpool. Hold your breath.
I found an episode of Britain's Favourite View with David Dickinson, and he was on Pleasure Beach.
You walked in and you saw him laughing like that, and that was part of the atmosphere and the noise of the ride. This really meant that you were here on the Pleasure Beach.
I also found this advert for Iron Brew because at that point they still sponsored Revolution.
There you go.
Baby, baby, what can I do? You know you drive me crazy when I'm looking at you. The summer's really here and it's time to come out. Time to discover what fun is about. Here comes the summer. Here comes the summer. Here comes the summer. Here comes the summer. Here comes the summer.
There was only one addition that I could find in 2008, and that wasn't actually in the park, it was kind of connected to the park, and that was the Adventure Golf, just situated outside. Now, it was opened by Christopher Biggins. Again, something I've done a few times. It's actually not a bad little Adventure Golf course, and I guess they're trying to lean into that now with the new resort branding because, you know, they've got all these extra things on top of the park. But I am curious how often any of you guys use the Adventure Golf. I did find an advert from this year. And as you'll see over the next few years, it's interesting, we've talked about this already in this series and indeed other videos, and that is the pricing structure of the park and how it is kind of a little bit crazy at the moment. In this advert, it was still 20 quid to get in, and it stays that way for quite some time, and it ramps up very rapidly at the end. So keep an eye out for that as we go through these years.
See it, feel it, love it. Pleasure Beach, fantastic fun for everyone. Now only £20 per person. but fabulous rides and spectacular shows. Kids under a metre go free. Admission for rides and shows now only £20 per person at pleasurebeachblackpool.com.
Right, so speaking of pricing, 2009 is when the entry fee was introduced. Prior to that, obviously it was free to enter, you could wander around, paper ride, etc. Now, many of you missed those, and in several videos I've posted have said bring back free entry, etc. I understand exactly what everyone's saying. I get that it is a very different proposition to the other theme parks around the UK, because in theory there's a lot of just passing trade in Blackpool who may want to pop in for a little bit. And forcing them to pay, I get that. However, if you've seen the previous episode for Jeffrey Thompson, some of the footage that I showed from the 80s and 90s was quite a rough place. There was quite a lot of trouble and heavy presence of security, which I suspect would definitely be needed today, if not more so. So I kind of understand the lack of free entry. I know it frustrates many people, and certainly the current pricing of 50 quid for everybody is just putting a lot of people off, because if you're a family and you've got granny and granddad with you, they're not paying 50 quid to do nothing. That seems crazy. So they do need to do something, but this was the year that free entry was dropped. Interestingly, I saw a comment from Amanda, or in an interview, she said, everyone has a very inflated view of how well Pleasure Beach does when they look at the numbers we get. But what they forget is there's no gate price on the park. Not everyone pays. The trouble is, when something is free all the way along and then you change that, everyone hates you for doing it. And she's not wrong. There's definitely a lot of hate for that introduction of a fee. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. As I say, many of you want it. Do you actually think it could still work? Now, there was another accident in the park this year. This time it was on the Big Dipper. 2 trains collided and a few people needed to visit the hospital. I'm actually curious about that one, because so it's a manual braking system on that ride, which arguably could lead to the problem that it has, right? If the person didn't pull the brakes, then 2 trains could collide. I don't know if it's as a result of this particular accident, but I do know that, again, I'm sure it was Andy Highgate that mentioned this one when I was on one of the tours, and that is that you may see occasionally nowadays the Big Dipper pause on the lift hill, and that is because the computer system obviously tracks the trains nowadays, as you'd expect, block systems and all that kind of good stuff. If the other train isn't yet in, it will stop that train on the lift hill. Now, it's an interesting choice, because I guess you would think, why does it even dispatch it? But that is now a thing. If you ever see it paused, it's just waiting on the other train to get to a certain point, and then it will release it. So I'm curious if that's a result of this accident or not. Now, there was an addition this year as well, and it cost a fortune, because from what I can see, it was nearly £750,000 to install this, but that is the dancing water show that sits outside FY4, so where Trauma Towers used to be. Obviously, spectacular jet show. I think it's probably underappreciated, to be honest, especially at that sort of price. It's one of those things you kind of walk past. I think it runs every 20 minutes, half an hour, so you know it's reasonably frequent. But it chews through a lot of water, has tons and tons of pumps, and obviously cost an absolute fortune to put in. I found 2 adverts for the park this year. One is actually from the park, so I'll play that one just now.
See it. Feel it. Love Pleasure Beach. Now open for fun weekends until the 5th of April. Save £5 when you book online at pleasurebeachresort.com.
And any other one, you'll probably recognise this. I'm sure many of you will remember this advert. It wasn't actually for Blackpool Pleasure Beach, it was for Specsavers.
That's better. So crowded.
Noisy too. Got a cheese one?
It's nice to take the weight off your feet.
What sort of cheese was that?
There was only one small addition in 2010, and that was dodgems. Now, as I've said in previous videos, the park has had more than its fair share of sets of dodgems, many different ones over the years, but this is the ones that we have still got today. Now, initially these were not included in the unlimited wristbands. You had to pay separately for them. They are now included, which is a good thing, especially at the price of the ticket. Apparently Prince William visited the park as part of his friend's stag do. Many news articles are saying that he was in the Pleasure Beach. Not sure if he was there during kind of public opening hours or if it was kind of like a private event, but there you go. Prince William was on the Pleasure Beach. Another one I found that was a little bit strange was an image outside the Grand National with various reviews from different newspapers. Given the Nash these days, as I've said, some people still love the Nash, think it's the best ride in the UK, wooden coaster anyway. Others, like myself, think it's got a lot of potential, but the current trains just kill it. So I'm curious to see what the reviews would say nowadays, but yeah, fairly glowing reports from the newspapers back in 2010. Again, sticking with the randomness, I found that the Pleasure Beach was fined £17,000 for breach of packaging regulations dating back to 1997. Apparently, if you have more than 50 tons of packaging waste and a turnover of more than 2 million a year, you need to register for compliance. Who knew there was a whole website dedicated to packaging news? So there was a huge investment in 2011, and that was when they partnered with Viacom and brought Nickelodeon Land to the Pleasure Beach. So obviously Beaver Creek was no more, massive redevelopment. Some rides stayed rethemed, many rides removed and new rides added. Now obviously nowadays in Nickelodeon Land we have Airbender, Dora's World Voyage, SpongeBob Splash Bash, Backyardigans Pirate Treasure, which I think is a retheme of what was there before, Bikini Bus Bottom Tours, Diego's Rainforest Rescue, Fairy World Taxi Spin, Krusty Krab Order Up, Wonder Pet's Big Circle Bounce, and they moved the Alpine Rally over, or Turnpike, or whatever it was called, over underneath Avalanche. It wasn't operating the last few times I've been there, so I don't know if that is SB&O or if it's just periodically run, couldn't tell you. Obviously, with a massive investment like this and partnering with Nickelodeon, there was an advert for it.
Pleasure Beach Blackpool, the most ride-intensive amusement park where the UK's biggest roller coasters meet spectacular shows. Now Pleasure Beach presents Nickelodeon Land. 12 fabulous new rides and 6 more acres of fun for everyone. The UK's only Nickelodeon Land. Open now at Pleasure Beach Blackpool. See it, feel it, love it. Save £5 when you book online at pleasurebeachresort.com.
Oh, and the area was opened by David Hasselhoff. I can't be 100% sure on this one, but anecdotally from what I've seen both in adverts and chat to people online, I believe 2011 was the year that the livery on the big one was changed from the old grey stripes, colour stripes, to the Union Jack that it is today. I know a lot of people were hoping it would return to its original colour scheme for its birthday, but its birthday seemed to go mostly unnoticed this year. I did find some footage of JLS on the Big Dipper this year. I think it was from one of their DVDs. Two other things launched this year as well. The first one was Speedy Pass. Now, that's a weird one. The current state of the park and the lack of attendance seems a little bit pointless. I've seen people using it when there's literally no queue, which just seems, I mean, I suppose if you paid for it, you're gonna get your money's worth, but yeah, I mean, again, back in the days when the park was absolutely rammed, 100% Speedy Pass would be fantastic. I know there's lots of debates about Speedy Pass and, you know, privileged and makes everybody else go slower and all that kind of stuff. However, it was introduced in 2011. The other thing that came in 2011 was their first Halloween event, Vampire Beach, which still kind of kicks around these days. I'm not sure if I had this in the start, but if you've been in recent years, there's the big like 7-foot tall werewolf that goes around. Fairly tame compared to a lot of other scare fests or scare events around the UK, but nonetheless, this is theirs. Now in 2012, the facade of Valhalla was updated. I believe there were some problems with the waterfall corroding it. Anyway, it got a bit of a facelift on the front. You may remember in the previous episode we had Richard Rodriguez, who got a record for staying on the Big Dipper for something crazy like 40 days or something, day and night, all that kind of stuff. Well, he came back and he beat his own record, but this time he did it on the big one, and he rode it for around 102 days. Now, sadly, this was also the last year that the monorail would operate. The station stayed for the next year, I believe, but then that has been removed. Portions, but not all of the track has been removed. I mean, I kind of get why it's kind of difficult to get in and remove it all, but it is kind of a painful reminder seeing most of it still sitting there around the park to this day. Now, the park has obviously got a number of ghost stories. We all know about Cloggy in the Ghost Train, so it's not surprising that yet another TV show filmed on the park. This time it was Great British Ghosts, and they specifically targeted 2 different ghost stories in the park.
Well, there's lots of different stories associated with the Pleasure Beach, primarily with the ghost train ride itself, which amazingly has a real ghost story attached to it, and it's one with some decent evidence attached. It's actually a former worker named Cloggy, and also a poltergeist which moves around the items in the gift shop below the ride, the first ride in fact that was built on the Pleasure Beach in 1904, Sir Hiram Maxim's flying machines. There are other stories as well, but those 2 are the main ones.
I've got an advert here from 2012, and what I thought was kind of interesting, as I think I said earlier, the livery on the big one was changed. In this advert, they show both, and I'm fairly certain all 3 trains were converted at the same time, so I think it's just they didn't have fresh footage, so they just used some old stuff.
Wow weekends are back, and they're half price! Every weekend in February, Pleasure Beach Blackpool offers you a breathtaking adrenaline rush. Our biggest rides, highest drops and fastest roller coasters are waiting. All wristbands half price when booked online. This weekend and every weekend in February. And Nickelodeon Land is open during the whole week of half term. Half price wow weekends. Book online now at pleasurebeachresort.com.
So 2013 saw a new addition to the park. Well, it was more of a re-theme of an existing attraction. That is the gold mine, of course. It was closed, it was completely renovated and reopened as Wallace and Gromit's Thrill-O-Matic. As I say, exactly the same ride system, same track layout. It lost the interaction with the river caves that the previous ride had, and obviously got a nice shiny new facade. I think I mentioned this in a previous episode, but I'll use it again. There's still some remnants of the gold mine sitting there. Particularly there is a not a Han Solo. It was a Han Solo carbonite structure. It was re-themed a little bit to be Indiana Jones, and it still sits in the ride, hidden behind a curtain. And of course it wouldn't be a brand new attraction in the park without it getting its own advert.
Blackpool Pleasure Beach has a cracking new ride, Wallace and Gromit's Thrill-O-Matic. See all your favourite Wallace and Gromit characters.
It's a riveting new ride.
Now, from what I can tell, there was 2 other new experiences this year. The first one was Walk the Big One, obviously still running currently to this day. Was later enhanced with Walk the Big One XL. But yeah, if you've got a head for heights and want to see behind the scenes, then you can walk up the lift hill off the big one. And then the other one I got was, it's not specifically a Blackpool thing, although for many, many years it has run on the Pleasure Beach in the Paradise Rooms, and that is the Fawlty Towers dining experience. As I say, this is something that kind of operates up and down the country in various different locations, but it has been in Pleasure Beach since 2013. And in fact, usually there's an advert on the Boulevard's website, possibly the big one as well, where your kind of stay includes access to that. So they obviously lean into that and make it part of a package. Now, 2014, there was another unfortunate accident on the Grand National. Now, there was a gentleman who had neck and back injuries. I believe he actually had some health issues prior to riding the ride. But he came, apparently when the train returned to the station, he was slumped at the bottom of the carriage. Not entirely sure how that's possible, especially since it was the current trains that were in operation at that point, because I don't think the restraints were any different back then, so I'm not sure how he slumped. But anyway, he, as I say, that thing is rough as hell. He had some pretty severe injuries after that one. I also found an interesting an advert for EE with Kevin Bacon. Now they're trying to protect, go on about, you get 4G in all these places, all over the place. One of which is on the big one. I kind of find that a little bit ironic that the premise of the advert is him on his mobile phone watching, I think it was football, because I'm sure England were playing at that point, Yeah, watching stuff on his phone on the big one, when of course you are not allowed to use your phone on the rides at all, for obvious reasons. So it seems a little strange that the Pleasure Beach would be okay with an advert like this.
Are you nervous, Kev?
Not really. Sure, it's going to be a roller coaster ride, but I reckon we could make it. You just have to sit tight, early doors, not do anything silly.
What are you on?
4G from EE, the biggest, fastest, most reliable network. So I can watch England's games in more places than ever. Like here.
I'm closing my eyes for this bit.
Very wise. They've got a free kick on the edge of our box. The biggest, fastest, most reliable network.
Now this one kind of shocked me a little bit because Blackpool was voted one of the top 4 value for money. At this point in time, when they compared the tickets for 2 adults and 2 children, Blackpool was the cheapest. It wouldn't be now, but it was then, and you can see here the list of other parks that they compared to. So yeah, it used to be one of the cheapest parks to visit. If you are enjoying this video, please do consider giving it a like and a little subscription. I do this for other parks, and I will be looking for some recommendations on future parks to do. I have some ideas, but they do take a few months to put together. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on this one. As I say, Amanda gets a lot of criticism. Some of it's potentially justified. I do think sometimes she just gets the brunt of stuff. So let me know your thoughts down below. Let's keep going. Now 2015 saw the addition of Skyforce, sponsored by the Red Arrows, and of course opened by them. This is a Gerstlauer flight thing. Can't remember the model name. Not a huge fan of this. I mean, it's an alright ride to look at. I have personally never managed to get that damn thing to go upside down. I have tried my hardest. I'm exhausted when I get off it, and I get like 3/4 of the way, I just cannot get it to tilt. And there's always somebody right in front of you who's just going round doing loop-the-loops. So if you're able to get this to work, I'd love to know what the maximum number of rotations you have done, because mine's a big fat 0. Now, this was also the year that we started to get rumblings of a new coaster or a new ride coming to the park. Now there was a vehicle spotted in the car park. I think it was one of the marketing guys' cars, and on the spare tire on the back there was a cover that said Adventureering, kind of adventure and engineering combined. It's hard to say, but it said Project 2017. Now we obviously know it ended up being 2018, but even back then there was rumblings on forums of this being a Mack launch coaster, which of course turned out to be true. So, you know, that is 3 years ahead of it actually coming to the park. Coasters take a long time to plan. There are rumblings right now of a new coaster coming. Some believe it could even be a B&M. So, you know, sometimes these early rumours turn out to be true. You just need to be patient and wait. Interestingly, I found a website that said, you know, it was saying, oh, Peter Kay has been on the Pleasure Beach in 2015, 2018 and 2021. The picture it claims is 2015 is him standing in front of Icon. Kind of impressive, since it wasn't built for another 3 years. So 2016 saw a couple of teenagers, I think as young as like 13, 14, maybe 15, break into the Pleasure Beach around 4 o'clock in the morning and spent a good hour joyriding the Blue Flyer before they were caught. I find that one a little bit odd. They obviously turned, I mean, it's not a computerized ride by any stretch of the imagination, it's like manual brakes. But they obviously had to turn on the lift hill to get it up, and I would have thought that was locked and needed a key, but it certainly would be nowadays. But yeah, they managed to joyride that attraction for, as I say, close to an hour before they were caught. So I've got the advert here from 2016, and it says wristbands from 17 quid. Now, currently, even a kid's wristband purchased in advance is 30 quid. It's only been, well, it's been 8 years, but that's a fairly steep increase.
Blackpool Pleasure Beach. Book online for sensational savings. Ride all-day wristbands from only £17 when you book in advance at blackpoolpleasurebeach.com. Experience a fun-packed, laughter-filled day out with exciting rides for the whole family. Book online now at blackpoolpleasurebeach.com.
Now, I kind of mentioned this in a previous episode, but 2017 was the final year of the Wild Mouse. I believe it got magnetic brakes in 2017, or for 2017, but yeah, in the closed season of 17 on to 18, it was removed without warning, which many people were very upset about. and still missed to this day. Also found the Pleasure Beach make a very brief appearance in a movie called A Monster Calls.
I wish I had 100 years I could give to you.
The park introduced an app/game this year called The Big One Buckle Up, where you could basically earn points, and those points could be used on free wristbands or food, so donuts as an example. It didn't last much longer than the first year though, and from what I've seen on Twitter, it's because, you know, some people were taking those freebies and selling them on eBay. 2018 was a massive year for the park. Obviously we got Icon, the UK's first double launch coaster. It was, for many people, the best coaster in the UK up until this year, when Hyperia opened. I've still not been on Hyperia, I can't comment on that. I picked the one day it was shut. But yeah, we got this massive new coaster. Now it is obviously, it's a great coaster. It does have that Mack rattle now after a few years. Doesn't in any way detract from the experience, but it is fantastic. There's a few pictures here. I've got Amanda with the Mack family when it launched. I've also got Russell Brand, and then I also have Tyson Fury. I found a video of them talking about the construction of Icon, so here's a little clip of them before the ride opened.
It's without doubt the most complex thing we've ever tackled, and the most complex technology we've ever seen on site.
From small beginnings come great things. From the fusion of metal and mind, precision is perfected. Something truly unique is coming, woven into the fabric of the earth. The UK's first double-launch roller coaster, Icon Dare to Ride, now open at Blackpool Pleasure Beach.
I found a rather strange article online. Apparently there was a massive push, or maybe there still is, to reduce the amount of smoking in Blackpool, and they particularly targeted pregnant mums. Now, each to their own. Smoking during your pregnancy? Interesting. But they basically tried to target these pregnant mums and give them some vouchers if they could prove they weren't smoking. I think they were testing them to see if there was nicotine and all that kind of stuff. But one of the vouchers they got was access to the Pleasure Beach. Bit of a strange one. I mean, if you're pregnant, there's a limit to what rides you can do, so what choice? Okay, so 2019, fairly quiet. We got Boulevard, which is obviously a massive investment in the park. Beautiful hotel, stayed in it a few times. It's not cheap, but it is very nice. And obviously, as we'll get on to shortly, there's some rumblings about another hotel coming. But, so we got the hotel, fantastic, all good. I kind of mentioned this in a previous episode, but the Grand National was taken over by a bunch of nudists who were trying to get a world record. I'm not being funny, but if there's one ride you don't want your bits flying around on, it's probably the Grand National. That thing's painful with clothes on. That would be brutal with no clothes on, so brave people. And I've also got an advert from 2019.
Ride big at Blackpool Pleasure Beach, packed with thrilling rides. Ride high, ride fast, ride upside down, ride 360, ride backwards, ride sky high, and ride Icon. Ride big at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. Book online now at blackpoolpleasurebeach.com.
Now, 2020 was obviously not a great year for anybody. The entire industry kind of suffered massively due to COVID. But there were some additions, well not additions, there were some things happening around the park. This was the first year that Tazaker got involved and started retracking the big one. Now, as we know, the past few years they have taken different sections and retracked them. Now, there are some rumblings that that is not happening anymore. Now, whether that is they are getting another company to do it, whether that is they paused it, who knows? But it'll be interesting to see this closed season whether they continue that work or not. Now, also, Amanda became the chairman of IAAPA this year and 2021. Now, IAAPA is the International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions. Basically, if you don't know, there are conferences, there's Orlando, and I think there might be one in Europe as well, where ride manufacturers show off their new toys and parks announce their new rides as well. So you'll quite often see parks show off the train for their new attractions. So Falcon's Flight, the huge one being built in Qiddiya right now, that was shown last year, I think. They kind of went, here's the trains, ta-da! But Amanda was the chairman for a couple of years. And obviously with COVID being, well, new territory for everybody, So was the process of wearing masks. And many people, I mean, it wasn't the best experience wearing masks on coasters, but a lot of people were worried about how's this going to work. So this morning did what they always do, and they sent Josie Gibson on.
Right, here we go. Wish me luck, Davina, wish me luck, Phil.
Good luck.
Good luck.
Josie.
Oh,
Good luck.
please help me.
Now you'd think 2021 was sponsored by Take That, because the two things I've got for you both relate to Take That. The first one is a picture of Gary Barlow, yet again, on the park. And the second one was that there was rumblings that Robbie Williams was going to, or was interested in purchasing the park. Now, there was a tweet released by the park that said, Blackpool Pleasure Beach, which is wholly owned by the Thompson family, has no regrets that Robbie Williams may have misunderstood that something beautiful like the Blackpool Pleasure Beach is available to buy. With a view beyond the sea from the top of the big one, it is no surprise that he is interested. But for now, let us entertain you when we reopen for our 125th season on April the 12th. So there you go. Rumours of park being sold. I know some people lately have said, sell up, give it to Merlin, you know, let somebody else take over. I do think, as we'll cover very shortly, that we are about to turn a corner with the park and see a bright future, but who knows. Now interestingly, the other thing we got this year was the WG Bean coffee house. So it used to be Costa at the entrance, it is now kind of self-run WG Bean. Obviously the founder of the park, well, one of the founders, him and John Outhwaite, as you've probably seen from the first episode. So there's been some comments lately that they are stepping away from heritage. Interesting, given that only 2 or 3 years ago they put that coffee shop in specifically with the name of the founders, which, well, that's them leaning into heritage, isn't it? Now move on to 2022, and we saw an upgrade to Icon, and that was of course in the form of Enso, where the back two seats on one of the 3 trains rotates. Now I've been on this a handful of times. It is a great experience, especially if you do get that weight distribution right. If you're either on your own or with somebody who's either way heavier than you or way lighter than you, it's fantastic. You spin, it's great. It is free spinning, so it's a unique experience every time. What I'm not so sure is so great, and I think many of you will have an opinion on that, is the £15 charge. Now, I don't mind it being an upcharge because there's obviously limited availability, so it being just a free thing in a queue, you probably end up with more people waiting for that and nobody waiting for the main ride. So I understand the need for a charge. 15 quid though, as I say, I've done it 2 or 3 times, maybe 4, but you know, it's certainly not something I do every visit. That said, if it was a £5, I'd probably do it at least once per visit because it is worth it. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how whether you've been on Enso, whether you think the price is reasonable or not. Now there was also a lot of talk about a big wheel. Now there was a trademark registered to Blackpool for Head Above the Clouds, and it had kind of like a Ferris wheel logo to go with it. And there was a gondola spotted outside the park. Now, well, that was 2022, or 2 years on, and so far that has not happened. There's obviously a lot of talk right now about new attractions, and we'll cover that in a few minutes' time. I don't know if this one is still on the horizon. Maybe it's just taking a little longer, maybe they're doing something else. Maybe it's completely gone. But yeah, the fact that trademark and hardware were spotted, curious. That's a little bit more than your average rumour. Now we move on to 2023, and of course we finally see the return of Valhalla. Obviously closed in 2019, anticipating closure for the 2020 season and expected it to reopen in 2021. We all know why that didn't happen. Supply chains, Brexit, COVID, multitude of reasons, many of which we'll probably never know the details of, but it did finally open in 2023. Amanda was always quite cutting about it. She regularly said that the M55 extension would beat them to it. But it did open, and it had technical rehearsals to begin with, which, I mean, that's not something we see a lot of in the UK, so I think a lot of people misunderstood the point of a technical rehearsal. I went on it on technical rehearsal. I got into the show building, round to the first scene before the lift hill, and got evacuated. Now, so I never saw any of it until the ride actually opened, but that's what technical rehearsals are all about, right? You may go on it and it doesn't succeed all the way around the track. You may go on it and there's no music. You may go on it and one effect isn't working. It's the whole point of technical rehearsals. They got a lot of flack for that, and I think that's more just a lack of education in the people that were going on the ride. But it did eventually open, and it was pretty well received, to be honest. There are some people who prefer the original for sure. Let me know down below what you think on this one, but they definitely spent a lot of money on it. I am disappointed they took out that cold room, but I understand that was the whole point of this, was to keep the running costs more maintainable, because I believe it cost an absolute fortune to run that ride with the gas and all that. So it came back. Interestingly though, the boats, although they've had a facelift, they're now black, they still have the same drainage issues. And you know, it's still common to step into a puddle, and of course they make you put your feet down, so you get soaked. And also, as well as the drainage issues, it still has some reliability issues. Now I think it's a little bit better than it was at the start of 2023, but I mean, it doesn't open until after lunchtime. I guess there's that argument of why would you want to get soaked first thing in the morning, but if it is one of those rare nice days, getting soaked early, you've got the whole day to dry off. And of course it wouldn't be a new attraction without a corresponding advert. Now, there were some rumblings of the buildings along the promenade outside the Pleasure Beach being kind of upgraded and used for some accommodation. I don't know what's happened to that. There's not been anything further off that, and obviously there's now talk about a new hotel, so I don't know if that has replaced that. Amanda did mention something at the same time about some pet-friendly apartments next to the boulevard. I don't know if that's what these are going to be, but yeah, there was some kind of drawings of proposed upgrades to that facade and the use. There were tons of markings along the outside as well. I think people thought it was going to be some sort of Airbnb style thing. Who knows? Nothing has happened off it since. This was also the Big Dipper's 100th birthday, and it got a glow up. They've stopped painting the woodies because you know, although it does look a little bad, the paint was causing more damage to the wood than good. But they did paint this one for its 100th anniversary, and it did look fantastic. I think it still does. Can't recall what it looked like this year, but they took down the big teardrop onion thing from the top, spruced that up as well, put it back up there, and they did have a little party for it on its 100th birthday. And to have a joint birthday, Sooty and Sweep turned 75, and they rode the Big Dipper. Oh, Tim Burton also visited the park with pictures of him on Alice and sitting outside the ghost train. I guess one of the big things we got in 2023, as well as Valhalla, was the new shop. So the old ticket area inside the casino building, I mean, now that it's all e-tickets, that's a separate conversation. I know they're not particularly popular. There's no need to go and stand in a queue to get a physical wristband, which you can still do, by the way. You can still go to guest services and ask for one. But that area is now a retail area, and you have to walk through that to enter the park. You can no longer go around the side of it. It's actually quite a nice shop, lots of good merch in there, so I think that is quite a nice upgrade that they did last year. Now, 2023, Pleasure Beach launched a fan club. Now, this is free to join. Anybody can join, obviously. You don't have to be a season pass holder. And they've had a few events that they've held. Now, there's two in 2023. The first one was a behind the scenes of both Wallace and Gromit and the Derby Racer. Sadly, I couldn't attend that one. And then the second one was walking a small portion of the Big Dipper and also walking on Revolution. Again, I couldn't make that one, unfortunately. So that takes us up to the current year, 2024, and quite a lot has happened actually this year. So for starters, before the park opened, they announced a rebrand to Pleasure Beach Resort instead of Blackpool Pleasure Beach. It's a little bit of a funny one. For starters, if you go into the gift shop underneath, the Kiss Me Quick, underneath the flying machines, they've still got Blackpool Pleasure Beach Resort, and Pleasure Beach Lancashire. So they've got multiple branding in there, which is a little bit mixed. The resort thing, I think it's probably something that they will lean more into. I mean, they say they've used it for a while, like off and on, and that's true. They obviously do have the hotels, they've got the golf, they've got the Ripley's, believe it or not, they've got shows, all that kind of stuff. They're not currently tied together very well in a resort. like the hotel guest entrance is used in the morning and then that's it. Like you can't just easily go in and out the park to the hotel, which would make it more of a resort. The original logo that came with this got slated because the first version we saw was blue and yellow, and a lot of people were like, it's IKEA, it's Ryanair, it's XYZ. They've sort of tweaked the colour scheme a little bit since then and brought Mr. Funshine back into it. I quite like the new logo. I have no issues with it. The resort bit, I mean, I'm going to call it Blackpool Pleasure Beach. It's not going to change its name in my head because I'm stubborn and I'm old. Now, the start of the season also saw a tweet from Amanda where she announced that Grand Prix was not going to be operating this year. It was being removed and they were working on a new attraction, which they will release some details later on. And then she also stated that PlayStation, or Ice Blast as we call it, is waiting for a part. It is not being removed. Now, it is currently the middle of August and it is still sitting there without that part. There have been engineers spotted in the last few days working on it, what appears to be taking stuff off. And I've done a whole separate video on that and potential of what that could mean. So if you haven't already seen that, I'll put a link up there. We've also seen documents recently of them taking out a loan to get an Intamin gyro swing. They've not announced anything, they've not said anything. Bizarrely, that loan has since been satisfied. It only lasted for like 3 or 4 days, so I don't know if that means it's cancelled or if they just really needed the money for a short period of time and they've paid it off, because that seems a little bit odd to me. But the hope is that we are getting a gyro swing and fingers crossed one of the big ones. So going back to the Grand Prix, we did have the final lap, which was, although the ride itself was closed all season, they did reopen it for 1 day to let people have that final shot on it. They did charge 50 quid, which I don't think it was worth the 50 quid, but again, maybe they're just sort of, you know, looking at increasing revenue for other things to do these kind of enhancements. They have started dismantling parts of the track already. They've taken stuff out of the station. You can purchase the guide rail stuff for 60 quid and bits. I did think they might have been using that as spare parts for Alice and Ghost Train, and maybe they did with some of the better parts and they're selling off some of the other parts. Who knows? But you know, that ride is no longer with us, and I am curious to see what it is that comes in its place. Now, 2 of the coasters on the park got some recognition from the American Coaster Enthusiasts. Now, they have a sort of award scheme, if you will, for any coasters that have historical significance. There are around 50 of them at the moment, and 2 of them went to Blackpool this year, and that was a Grand National and a Big Dipper. Now, sadly, this was also the year that the big one lost its record for the tallest coaster in the UK. Of course, Hyperia has since taken that from them. Now, the park did do some interesting marketing. At the launch of Hyperia, they had a van driving around Thorpe Park that was basically going, you know, how petty, a bit like us hiring this van, now we need to come up with something bigger. And they have, in an interview in one of the newspapers, said that they are planning an attraction that will take the guest experience to a whole new height. Now, of course, many people think that's them then going to try and take this height record back from Thorpe Park. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, who knows. I think they do have a bit of a challenge on their hands at Blackpool because being on the seafront, the wind is a problem. I mean, that's why the big one is closed regularly. I don't know if modern technology would allow coasters to operate in higher winds and make it more feasible, but I do think that is probably not going to happen, them taking back that particular height record. Of course, there is, as I said, some speculation. Well, we've seen records of them taking a loan for an Intamin gyro, and if it is the larger version, it will be the biggest one in the UK, and those things are bloody massive. So I really hope that is what we are going to get, as well as a coaster, of course. Now, it looks like the park might have planned on having multiple season pass options this year, but that didn't quite happen. So towards the end of last year, 2023, there was like I think it was an autumn season pass just for a couple of months. Now, I think it was Scott on Your Experience Guide that found this, and I've checked, they still exist on the website today. If you do a quick Google for season pass, you will see there are 4 images come up on the Blackpool Pleasure Beach website. Don't know, I mean, they're not used anywhere on the website, but they obviously sit on that server somewhere for seasonal season passes. So you've got a spring, a summer, a winter, and an autumn. I mean, we're nearly through the season now. We've only got a couple of months to go, and nothing has happened. But I don't know if that is something they are considering. I mean, again, we've talked about this many, many times. It feels like something needs to be done to the pricing structure. Maybe these kind of short period season passes is part of that, because I know there will be some people who are like, well, I might want to visit multiple times in the summer, I'm not paying for the whole season. So it does make a lot of sense. But yeah, spotted online, not happened yet. I think I might have touched on this already, but there was obviously an interview with one of the Mac family where Amanda basically said that a third hotel is on the table, planning, you know, early stages, subject to funding, and she would like it to go over at the entrance to the park. And a lot of people think the globe is going to be stripped away and a hotel put in its place. And again, many people are like, why build a hotel? Put the money in the park. The only thing I would say, I mean, I've got a video on this, again, feel free to go and watch that one. The only thing I would say is that the hotels are, I don't want to say propping the business up, but they are the profitable arm of the business right now. And if they are able to take that profit from the hotel and use it back in the park to regenerate it, I'm all for it. I have no issues with that. If they are just going to build hotels and leave the park untouched, well, that's a very different proposition, isn't it? Now in 2024, we have had one club event so far. I'm not sure if there is going to be another one. We are getting a bit late in the season, but I was fortunate enough to attend it, and that was the Ghosts and Gardens. So we got to go behind the scenes on the ghost train and walk the entire route. And we also got to go into a portion of the steeplechase. Weather wasn't the best though, so that was, yeah, interesting. Free donuts though. I also found an article, I mean, scraping the barrel here, an article with a list of strange items found in the park. I did something similar with Thorpe Park, but the things that were found include an A3 printout of Harry Styles' face, a number of wigs, Santa hat, Marlene Dietrich's earring. So she was on the Pleasure Beach, well, a long time ago, and lost her earring, and that was found. A prosthetic ear, sure. A couple of pairs of dentures, some swim goggles and a cap. 3 out of the 7 Harry Potter books. Oh, and my house key and car key, because I'm an idiot and I went on Icon and didn't zip my pocket up and watched my keys fly out my pocket. I had to grovel to my ex-wife to jump on a train from Edinburgh and bring the spare car key. Yay! But there you go, that brings an end to this mini-series. You've probably seen all 4 parts now, all 4 managing directors, and they all played a different role in the history of the park. Clearly Jeffrey was a very, very influential man, very busy, and did a ton for the park. I've got some other videos coming up about the park in the coming months, so make sure you are subscribed. But yeah, I have been Chris, you've been watching Coaster Dad. If you missed any of the previous episodes, there they are. See you later.